Under the cold shroud of a dying star, an ancient question murmurs through the drifting ash of forgotten empires. What becomes of a world when the great devourer turns its gaze upon it? Some say the first omen is silence, an unnatural stilling of wind and beast, as though the planet itself holds its breath. Others claim the truth is older than prophecy, etched into the marrow of extinct species who once tried and failed to outrun the hunger. What follows is not invasion, it is erasure. A rewriting of matter into the language of a cosmic predator. It begins at the edge of the void, where synapse shadows swim like submerged leviathans beneath the fabric of reality. Long before a single spore breaches the atmosphere, the psychic tide rolls in an invisible front that scrapes the minds of astropaths raw. Some claw their eyes out. Others speak in broken tongues of a thousand-throated choir approaching from between the stars. And as the warning echoes through the Vox, the Imperium stirs too late, for by the time humanity senses doom, the Tyranids have already tasted the world's fear. High fleet tendrils extend, thin as whispers, empowered by a will that is not a will, an intellect that is not an intellect. They descend like a blight disguised as starlight. At high orbit, the outer chitinous shells bloom open, releasing clouds of mycetic spores that transform the skies into bruised swarms of biological nightmares. Each spore holds a future atrocity, gaunts, gargoyles, warrior strains gestating armies that need no banners, no command, only the shadow of the hive mind pressing down upon their instinctive pathways like a tyrant's boot. Cities ignite before battle is even joined. Pollution filters choke on spores. Water supplies curdle into biomass slurry. Those who flee find themselves running through forests that twist, roots writhing under unseen bioelectric pulses. And those who stand their ground soon learn the first truth of the great devourer. It does not conquer by force of arms alone, its mere presence begins the feast. Even the brave pray quicker, in shorter, harsher breaths, knowing that the enemy feeds on their terror as readily as their flesh. Then the sky cracks open. A tidal wave of living meteors screams downward, punching craters into the earth. From the debris rise gaunts in their thousands, firing bioplasma and bone shards as they surge like a singular ravenous organism. Imperial guard lines break. Vox officers recite litanies between dying screams. Commissars fire bolt rounds into deserters not out of discipline, but mercy. And still the swarm advances, never pausing, never confused, never afraid. For within the shadow in the warp, fear is a luxury denied to mortals. From orbit, the true atrocity blooms. A tendril of the hive fleet descends like a vast fleshy anchor, rupturing clouds as though reality is tearing itself apart to welcome its masters. The Norn queens within direct the feast with maternal cruelty, birthing fresh broods even as millions die below. Every corpse is repurposed. Every structure becomes nutrient paste. Every scream is swallowed by the psychic pressure until even hope tastes of chemicals and dust. Astartes' intervention arrives like a thunderclap, the Adeptus Astartes drop pods slamming into the chaos below, delivering warriors bred for extinction-level warfare. Their chainswords roar hymns of retribution. Their bolters sing with explosive wrath. For a moment, they carve order from the madness. But the Tyranids adapt faster than courage can hold. Gaunts shift tactics within minutes. Lictors slip through shadows to peel Marines from their squads. A Carnifex charges, absorbing volleys that would shatter tanks, its roar shaking the bones of angels carved into cathedral walls. As the planetary defense grid collapses, the atmospheric strip mining begins. Capillary towers erupt from the ground like crimson spears. They pierce the heavens, sucking oceans dry, draining atmospheres, bleeding continents. Cities collapse as foundations liquefy. Mountains melt into nutrient rivers, feeding the digestion pools forming below. All the while the hive mind feasts not just on flesh, but on memory, on instinct, on the very genetic stories of the world. In the throne room of the planet's governor's palace, final prayers echo. He stares at the holomap as the last defensive bastion flickers out. He wonders not whether he will die, but if, somewhere across the galaxy, someone will remember that his world once had a name before the Tyranids consumed its last syllable. His final deed is a message whispered into a failing voxcaster. Do not send reinforcements. Only fire. Exterminatus signatures prime in orbit. Cyclonic torpedoes are armed. Yet even as the order is given, the Hive fleet's tendrils wrap around the void-shielded vessels, draining their reactors, cracking their hulls open like eggs. The Imperium's greatest mercy is denied. The world must now suffer the full appetite of the devourer. No clean ending, no burning absolution, only dissolution. By the time the last fortress falls, the planet is unrecognizable. Its crust pulses, veined with living tissue. Storms of digestive acid sweep the remains of once great civilizations into the feeding pools. From orbit, it resembles a colossal wound swollen, breathing, twitching as the biomass funnels upward into the waiting maws of the bioships. And yet, in the final hours before the world is fully consumed, something changes. A flicker, a tremor, a psychic ripple that even the hive mind does not recognize. A single spore node, deep in the writhing mantle of the planet, pulses out of sync. Gene-encoded memories, stolen from millions, twist into a pattern no Norn Queen intended. For the first time in an age, the devourer hesitates. The world dies, the swarm withdraws. And in the drifting dust of an erased civilization, a new organism forms, small, fragile, yet radiating a psychic note unlike any known strain. A signal, a question, the hive mind listens. And in the void between stars, something answers. In the cold afterglow of the world's death, as the final psychic tremor of the newborn aberration faded into the void, the universe seemed to hold its breath. The surviving astropaths aboard the drifting remnants of the battle fleet felt at first, not a voice, but a pressure like a knuckle dragging slowly across the surface of their souls. Some collapsed into seizures. Others wept without knowing why. A few whispered that something ancient had stirred, awakened by the Tyranids' unintentional birth of an unsanctioned life form. And as the fleet limped through the half-burnt stars, its chaplains intoned louder prayers, not out of faith, but fear, because even their sacred catechisms shook with uncertainty, as though the Emperor's light flickered behind some unseen veil. Across the ship decks, space marines who had survived the planetary holocaust removed their helmets in grim silence. Their armor still dripped with the ichor of a world that no longer existed. They felt the aberrant signal too, though muted, filtered through the apothecarian's psychic dampeners. Some dismissed it as phantom pain from a lost battle. Others recognized a deeper truth. The hive mind had faltered, however briefly, and such a break in its omnipotent cohesion was not a blessing, but a warning. The librarians gathered in the stratageum's dim glow, their eyes lit by the blue fire of warp sight, each seeing fragments the others could not. And in their shared visions, a single image persisted, a seed swimming in the dark, drawing attention from forces older than the Imperium. Down in the lower holds, the forgotten steel catacombs where mortal crew labored, the whispers spread faster than the damp chill that clung to the pipes. Some claimed the Astartes had brought something aboard, a remnant of the devoured world. Others muttered that the Emperor's tarot had shown a black sun rising behind a maw of teeth. A few, bold or foolish, suggested that perhaps the Tyranids themselves had been a trial, not a scourge, that perhaps the galaxy was shifting, and the Emperor's silence meant judgment was near. Such thoughts were heresy, yet heresy always grew in the cracks of despair. And aboard a fleet mourning billions swallowed by the great devourer, cracks were plentiful. In the chapel of Sanctus Mortis, the master chaplain knelt before the relic shrine. Censer smoke curled like dying spirits around broken icons. His rosarius flickered dimly. He felt no divine warmth, only the echo of that accursed psychic pulse. And in it, He sensed a flavor he could not name, neither tyrannid nor warp-spawned, yet unmistakably alive. Faith warred with instinct. If such a thing existed, perhaps it was a sign. Perhaps it was corruption. Or perhaps it was a test of a faith already stretched thin by centuries of war without victory. He whispered a prayer for clarity, but received only silence in return. The fleet's inquisitorial observer, long cloaked in the anonymity of distant authority, emerged from the shadows to question the librarians. She bore a rosette that might command an army, yet her expression betrayed something dangerously human: curiosity. She spoke of patterns in the hive mind's recent behavior, of rumors that certain tendrils of the great devourer had acted with uncharacteristic fragmentation. She questioned whether the aberrant psychic seed was not a mutation, but an infection, an idea implanted into the tyranid genome by something else. Her implication was treason against reason itself, that there existed a force capable of invading even the devourer. Meanwhile, the Astartes captain reviewed the after-action data. Amid the ruins of the lost world, the picked feeds had caught a fleeting anomaly, a figure, indistinct and shimmering, seen moments before the planet's crust liquefied. Too humanoid to be tyrannid, too still to be a psyker's illusion. A figure standing as the feeding towers rose around it, untouched. The captain dismissed the possibility. He tried to, but doubts festered. What witness survives the end of a world except the architect of its ruin? Night cycle aboard the flagship brought no peace. Dreams trembled with alien visions. Guardsmen saw themselves dissolving into streams of genetic memory. Tech priests murmured Ben-Huruk prayers as their augurs detected faint, rhythmic pulses like a heartbeat from the sealed xenobiology vault where samples from the devoured world were stored. The machine spirits recoiled, refusing to touch the data. Even the servitors glitched, shuddering as if resisting some unseen compulsion. Fear spread, quiet and hungry. The aberrant signal pulsed again, stronger, clearer. It threaded through the Geller fields like a needle of thought, brushing the minds of navigators with a touch colder than the void. The ship's alarms blared. Warp shadows gathered at the hull like vultures watching a dying beast. And deep within the fortress monastery deck, a librarian collapsed mid-ritual, clutching his chest. Through blood-foamed lips, he rasped a single phrase. "It calls to us." The Inquisitor demanded access to the vault. The captain refused, invoking the honor of his chapter. Their arguments spiraled into threats veiled as doctrine. The chaplain stepped between them, declaring that the Emperor's will must be discerned, not forced. But even his voice wavered. He too felt the pull of the unknown. And in the eyes of each leader flickered the same thought they dared not speak aloud: that righteousness meant nothing without truth, and truth was slipping like sand through their bloodied hands. As they reached the vault doors, they froze. The machine locks were open, the warnings deactivated. The cold lights inside flickered like dying stars. Something had broken protocol, something with knowledge of codes, with precision beyond any human infiltrator. The sample container lay cracked open, its stasis field ruptured. A trail of viscous shimmering residue led across the floor like the molting of a chrysalis. And at the far end of the vault, illuminated by the sickly glow of malfunctioning lumen strips, stood a silhouette humanoid, breathing softly. Its skin shifting as though remembering forms it had once consumed. It lifted its head. Its eyes were not human, nor tyrannid. And in a voice that sounded like 1,000 stolen lives speaking in unison, it whispered, "We remember you." Faith shattered, certainty died. And something unimaginable stepped into the light. For a heartbeat stretched across eternity, no one in the vault moved. The silhouette half-formed, half-remembered stood, as though time itself bent around it. The chaplain felt his faith falter, a hairline fracture spreading through the cathedral of certainty he had built across centuries. The creature's words echoed in his skull, not as sound, but as memories that were not his. He saw a world devoured, screams turned into genetic scripture, the echo of a child's final breath woven into this abomination's cells. Yet beneath all the horror, Something else stirred: recognition. As though the creature carried fragments of humanity's ancient sins, swallowed long before language learned to name them. The Inquisitor stepped forward, last pistol raised, her hand trembling for the first time since her ordination. She sensed the truth before reason allowed her to accept it. This being was not merely a mutation, it was a mirror, a reflection of what the galaxy had become. When her trigger finger tightened, the creature did not recoil. Instead, its flesh shimmered, rearranging itself like wet clay shaped by invisible fingers. And as it shifted, faces emerged, faces of those the fleet had lost, priests, soldiers, brothers in arms, each flickering like a memory drowning in an ocean of alien hunger. The Inquisitor stumbled back, breath torn from her. Elsewhere aboard the flagship, the psychic pulse intensified. Librarians collapsed across the monastery decks, their minds flooded with visions of a cosmic anatomy, of a galaxy with roots instead of stars, veins instead of void, each planet a pulsing organ feeding something colossal and unseen. They saw the TYRANIDS not as invaders, but symptoms like fever before death. They saw tendrils of impossible origin, slithering through the fabric of the galaxy long before the first humans crawled from old Earth's oceans. And they saw the aberrant creature in the vault as a byproduct, a fracture where two truths collided. A space marine knelt alone in an empty shrine, helm off, head bowed in silent turmoil. The creature had spoken with the voice of his fallen sergeant, words only those within their squad could know. He wanted to believe it was sorcery, deception, warp trickery. Yet a fragment of him, a dangerous ember, wondered whether the Emperor himself had allowed this. A test or a warning. But the shrine's candles sputtered as if exhaling their last breaths. And the Marine realized the more terrifying possibility, that the Emperor had not allowed this at all. That something else had intervened. The crew whispered of a curse, a contagion of thought. Because everywhere the aberration walked, the ship groaned like a wounded animal. Bulkheads warped subtly, metal creaking as though reacting to the creature's presence. Tech priests scrambled to interpret the runes of failing systems, yet even their mechadendrites trembled with unspoken dread. Some claimed to see eyes forming on the walls bioluminescent, blinking once before melting back into steel. Machine spirits whimpered through static, begging to be purged. The captain tried to rally reason, but reason had no meaning in a place where reality had begun to ripple. He ordered containment protocols. The corridors leading to the vault were sealed, but the creature did not remain contained. It passed through the steel and ceramite as though its body remembered a time when matter was not rigid, when the universe was still pliable under ancient hands. The creature roamed, studying, listening, mimicking faint human expressions with uncanny precision. And the deeper it traveled, the more the ship reacted, as if drawn toward it, or drawn from it. When the next psychic surge hit, stronger than before, the navigators screamed as their third eyes burst into bloody ruin. The Geller fields flickered. Warp shapes crawled across the void, attracted to whatever the creature was becoming. One of the librarians, half mad, whispered, "It is rewriting its purpose. It is learning." And in that revelation, dread rooted itself deeper than any hunger the TYRANIDS had ever brought. The chaplain confronted the creature in the reliquary deck, where relics of saints and heroes stared with hollow sockets from gilded shrines. The monster turned its shifting face toward him, and the chaplain felt as though he stood before an unborn god, an echo of something the TYRANIDS had accidentally excavated from the ruins of evolution. He demanded to know what it wanted. The creature hesitated, as if searching through the labyrinth of stolen memories. Then, slowly, it pressed a hand against its own chest and whispered, "To remember." "What made you?" The chaplain's knees buckled. This thing carried humanity's forgotten history in its cells, truths consumed by TYRANIDS across thousands of ruined worlds. But when the Inquisitor arrived with a kill team, the creature changed again. Its form elongated, hardened, growing spines like articulated memories. Its eyes darkened, filled with purpose that did not belong to any species known. Then the creature spoke once more, but not with stolen voices, this time with its own. "We are not the first. We are what comes after." The vault's lights shattered. The ship quaked. The psychic pressure spiked into a howling crescendo. And in a moment that spiraled out like a wound tearing across fate, the creature shed its humanoid shell, flesh-recnate, bone-warped. Wings of shimmering, translucent chitin unfurled wings, patterned with sigils no Xenos could have made. Sigils older than the Imperium, older than the warp, older than hunger. The chaplain, seeing the shape in its rising outline, whispered a name he did not know he remembered. Proto-hive mind. The creature opened its new eyes, like twin black holes, and everything the galaxy thought it understood began to unravel. The creature, no longer a creature, but a nascent catastrophe, stood before them with wings that shimmered like fractured starlight. Its presence worked the deck plating, bending the metal as if the ship itself bowed in terror. The chaplain felt something inside him break, a quiet snap like a relic dropped in a silent cathedral. Faith had always been an anchor. Now it became a chain dragging him into an abyss he could no longer deny. The proto-hive mind breathed, and the world narrowed to a single truth. They stood not before evolution nor mutation, but the rebirth of something the galaxy had forgotten, its long obsession with war. Something that remembered humanity not as prey, but as kin abandoned in the darkness. The Inquisitor fired first. A single lasbolt streaked through the dim light and struck the newborn entity. The beam burned through its shifting flesh, but instead of blood, a cascade of crystalline motes poured from the wound, swirling like nebula dust before fusing back into its form. Her shot was answered not with rage, but with a quiet, mournful exhalation that passed like cold wind through the deck. Every mortal nearby felt their hearts sink under the weight of an emotion they could barely name regret. It was as if the proto-being lamented the necessity of their conflict, as though it had hoped for recognition, not war. Outside the vault, alarms howled. The ship's augers detected gravitational distortions blooming like tumors in the void warp entities circling, drawn to the psychic birth throbbing within the vessel. The hull groaned, reverberating like the ribs of a dying leviathan. Servitors spasmed. Tech priests chanted Ben-Huric pleas that crackled like broken hymns. And still the officers tried to maintain order, marching their troops toward the growing anomaly, even as they felt the terrible futility of duty dragging at their boots. The captain gathered his remaining Astartes, the veterans whose armor bore the scars of a dozen extinction events. Yet none bore a scar like this, an enemy that was not evil, merely inevitable. As they advanced, he found himself remembering the faces of every brother he had lost to the Tyranids, every prayer unanswered as they held the line against the devourer. And now he stared down the truth. The thing before them had been born from those deaths, shaped by their sacrifices, sculpted from the ash of their failures. He wondered, in a quiet tremor of doubt, whether duty meant destroying it, or hearing what it had to say. The proto-being stepped forward, and the air thickened with psychic resonance. Visions spilled across the minds of the fleet ancient seed worlds, long erased, where humanity had once walked beside beings of living memory. Civilizations predating Terra's first fires. A forgotten pact forged in an age before names. And then the betrayal. The great sundering, when something older than the warp severed the proto-lineage from its creators, scattering them into the galaxy as half-born echoes. The Tyranids had found these remnants across millennia, devouring them, integrating them, twisting them into whispers. This newborn entity was a synthesis of all those erased voices, a last inheritance rising from extinction's grave. The Inquisitor felt her convictions quake beneath the enormity of the revelation. Her vows demanded annihilation. Her heart demanded answers. The being's wings dimmed, folding like weary banners as it spoke in a voice deeper than memory. "We were to be guardians, until you abandoned us to the void." The accusation struck like a power maul. Marines staggered. The chaplain felt bile rise in his throat. Had humanity once commanded powers greater than any demon? Had they willingly cast them out? The psychic storm outside intensified, battering the ship. Warp lightning crawled across void shields, snarling like chained beasts. Every astropath screamed at once visions of void tides rising, of distant hive fleets quivering, of a galaxy pivoting around this newborn intelligence like a dying star around its last supernova. The proto-being lifted its head toward the ceiling, as if listening to a chorus only it could hear. Its wings shivered. Its form brightened. The captain charged. His oath demanded action. His soul begged for clarity. Chainsword roaring, he leapt toward the entity only for the world to slow. The creature caught the blade with a single hand, not through strength, but through absolute mournful certainty. It whispered, "Do not force me to rise as an enemy." The captain froze, breath stolen, blade trembling in its grip. He felt not fear, but sorrow radiating from the being like dying sunlight. And that sorrow hollowed him more thoroughly than any wound. The Inquisitor raised her rosette, invoking excommunicate extremis. Her command boomed through the Vox net, ordering surrounding ships to prepare cyclonic obliteration. But as her voice carried into the void, a reply came soft, broken, terrified from one of the escort ships. "Inquisitor, my Emperor, preserve us. We are seeing something move." Between the stars, the proto-being's eyes widened. A shadow passed over the ship, a presence so massive it defied shape, as though the void itself had opened a pupil and stared back. The proto-being turned to the humans, its voice trembling with a fear that chilled every soul aboard. "You did not abandon us, you hid us. Because something worse was coming." Its wings flared like dying suns. "And it has found us again." The ship shuddered. In the void outside, the darkness blinked. The void blinked an impossible gesture, a cosmic eyelid closing over stars that had burned for 10 billion years. The deck plates thundered as gravity groaned beneath a force no mortal ship was meant to endure. The proto-being staggered, wings flickering like dying auroras. For the first time it looked small. The chaplain clutched his Crozius, knuckles white, feeling prayers fall dead on his tongue. The captain braced himself against the bulkhead, dread gnawing at his genetically tempered resolve. Even the Inquisitor lowered her weapon, her iron certainty fractured by the presence of something older than hunger, older than war, older than the first spark of human defiance. The ship lights dimmed as though the void itself pressed against the hull, whispering its arrival like a tomb being sealed. Then the stars erupted into motion. Tendrils of darkness the size of continents lashed out, coiling around the fleet like serpents tasting prey. A psychic shriek tore through the minds of every soul aboard sharp, jagged, a rending of reality's thin skin. The proto-being screamed, and the scream was not a sound, but a memory of extinction echoing across eras. It clutched its head, wings flaring violently as if trying to brace its own mind against a tidal wave. And in the fracture of its cry, an image burned into the minds of all present. An ancient, infinite predator, something the Tyranids feared, something the galaxy had forgotten not by accident, but because remembering would unmake sanity itself. The captain charged again, not out of defiance, but desperation. He struck at the shadow tendrils invading the vault, hacking at them as though his blade could carve destiny itself. The shadows recoiled, momentarily disrupted, and the proto-being rose. Its wings unfurled into luminous spires, each feather a shard of stolen genes, each fragment a relic of worlds-long dust. "It consumes thought," the being whispered. "It is the eater beneath the eater. You named it nothing, because you feared what a name would summon." Warp storms erupted around the ship. Colors that did not belong to mortal eyes spilled across the void. Hulls ruptured, screams folded into silence. Ships vanished into impossible geometries. The chaplain lunged to the captain's side, reciting the litany of ending, even as his voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. The Inquisitor watched in frozen terror as the proto-being lifted its hands toward the oncoming darkness, not in attack, but in offering. And the void trembled as though considering. A tendril pierced the ship clean, effortless. It stabbed through deck, steel, flesh, memory. It sought the proto-being, drawn by its impossible genesis. The captain stepped into its path without hesitation. The tendril drove through his chest, impaling him like an offering. He did not fall. He pushed forward, blood boiling into vapor, forcing the tendril back by sheer will. "I serve mankind," he roared, voice torn raw. The proto-being watched in stunned horror, wings shaking as if the sacrifice reached into the core of its identity. It whispered a single phrase, carved from pain. "You were always worthy." The being pressed its hand against the captain's back. Light tore from its wings, streaming into his dying form. For a moment, just a moment, the captain became radiant, armored in the memories of billions, burning with the rage and sorrow of 1,000 lost worlds. He turned toward the shadow swallowing the fleet, and with his last breath, he detonated. Not flesh meaning. A psychic explosion, fueled by the proto-being's gift. The void howled. The darkness recoiled, not destroyed, but wounded. A gap opened, a heartbeat-wide fracture in the vast predatory presence. The proto-being seized the moment, wings transforming into spears of raw consciousness. It dove into the breach, dragging the darkness with it, tearing a wound across reality that bled starlight. The ship was thrown clear. Silence fell. True silence, the kind left behind when gods bleed. In the aftermath, among drifting wreckage and the soft crackle of dying systems, the chaplain knelt beside the captain's empty armor. He touched the scorched pauldrons and felt something impossible, warmth. The Inquisitor stared into the void where the proto-being had vanished, unsure whether she had witnessed salvation or the birth of a new terror. Across the fleet, survivors whispered prayers, not out of faith, but out of fear of what silence now meant. In the distance, the stars flickered, one after another, as if some vast presence moved behind them, shifting the contours of night. And in the quiet that followed, a faint echo brushed against human minds. We are not gone. We are becoming. The first light after the cataclysm rose weakly, as if the sun itself hesitated to witness what remained. Across the scorched plain, the armor of the fallen glimmered like frozen tears, half buried in ash that once had been cities, prayers, and lives. A lone remembrancer walked the path carved by titans and despair, each footstep stirring ghosts that had no language left to speak. The wind carried fragments of oaths that would never again be sworn, fluttering weakly like torn scripture lashed to broken spires. No victory hymn rose, no banners claimed dominion. Only the memory of struggle, suspended above the stillness like a benediction no cleric dared to utter. Somewhere beneath the rubble, a vox bead crackled once, as if a dying star sighed. And the galaxy listened, trembling, unsure if it should mourn or kneel. In the ruined apse of a cathedral that had once touched the heavens, shattered stained glass saints cast fractured rainbows across floors now littered with bolter shells and burned offerings. A lone warrior, helm removed, traced trembling fingers across the cracked sigil of his order. Every color reflected upon him looked like a sin he could no longer name. The silence here was too heavy, too knowing, as though the holy ground itself remembered every scream, every plea, every whispered promise of salvation that never arrived. Above him, a gargoyle's broken wings hung frozen mid-beat, as if even stone had attempted to flee before the heavens split. He lifted his eyes to the dust-filled light, searching for meaning in the debris of faith. None came. Only the faint echo of a question he dared not ask. Why did the divine watch and remain still? The battlefield beyond spread out like a funereal tapestry, stitched from the remnants of dreams turned to ruin. Smoke drifted in languid ribbons, veiling the corpses of war engines locked in their final embraces, as if mutual destruction were the only intimacy the age allowed. A sister of battle knelt among them, her armor cracked, robes torn, rosary melted into her gauntlet. She whispered a final hymn for comrades she could not bury, voice raw with grief, yet steady with devotion. The words dissipated into the cold air, unanswered and unrewarded, but still she spoke them, not for salvation, but because silence felt like betrayal. When she rose, she left behind a single candle sputtering in the wind, fighting to stay lit in a world that no longer remembered warmth. Whether its flame endured did not matter. Its existence had already been a defiance. Far from the front, an orbital station hung broken against the void like a forgotten relic of a faithless age. Its lights flickered sporadically, pulsing like the dying heartbeat of a leviathan gutted by war. Through jagged viewports, the scars upon the planet's skin glowed faintly, scars carved not only by weapons, but by choices made in desperation, arrogance, and hope twisted into fanaticism. A lone astropath drifted through the corridor, blind but seeing more than mortal eyes could bear. Her whispers fluttered like torn lace, each syllable a plea carried along the Imperium, pleas for absolution, for meaning, for some reassurance that the pain had not been in vain. The warp answered only with a hush, the sound of cosmic indifference echoing through metal bones. Still she walked, still she prayed, for even unhearing gods were better than none at all. Across the cold deserts of a continent annihilated, a colossal banner lay half-buried beneath dunes of bone and dust. Once proud, once feared, once held high by warriors who had marched without hesitation into oblivion, now it sagged like a forgotten memory. A former sergeant stood beside it, leaning heavily on a spear that no longer hummed with power. He did not attempt to raise the banner. He simply watched it ripple weakly as the wind passed over it, as if the fabric exhaled a sigh of relief at being done with war. The sergeant whispered the names of his squad, each syllable trembling in the dry air, each name a gravestone etched not in stone but in breath. When he finished, he closed his eyes and asked the void a question that had no answer. What does loyalty mean when no one is left to witness it? Deep within a labyrinth of ruins, a broken servitor sat motionless, its once bright augmetics dimmed to embers. But somewhere within its fragmented cogitator core, something stirred, a memory, a command, a voice echoing from a life long buried beneath metal and duty. It played the fragment again and again, a recording of a child's laughter, faint and distorted, perhaps centuries old. The sound shimmered through the hollow corridors like a fragile miracle, reminding the shattered world that innocence had once existed here. A Tet priest knelt before the servitor, listening, unable to repair what was broken, yet unable to walk away. When the recording faded, he bowed his hooded head, whispering a blessing not sanctioned by any mechanicus rite, a simple hope that somewhere, somehow, something pure had survived. The servitor flickered once, as though acknowledging the prayer, then fell silent forever. Across the oceans churned into gray froth by falling debris and firestorms, a lone frigate drifted like a coffin upon the waves. Deck plating buckled, hull breached, yet the ship's shrine still stood intact. Candles burned to stubs, icons blackened by smoke, a single open tome fluttering in the salt wind. The captain, wrapped in a torn cloak, stood before it with bowed head. He had no fleet left to command, no orders, no glory to pursue. Only memories, only ghosts. He traced a finger across the pages of the tome, stopping on a passage he knew too well, one promising redemption through unwavering faith. He wondered if faith meant obedience or endurance. The sea offered no counsel, only the crushing, rhythmic pulse of waves that had witnessed 1,000 wars and forgotten them all. The captain whispered a vow, not to victory, but to remembrance. In the shattered underhive, where the dead outnumbered the living by uncountable margins, a single child walked through the wreckage, carrying a lantern fashioned from a broken helm. Inside it, a shard of glowing crystal pulsed faintly like a captured star. The child held it aloft, illuminating walls carved with graffiti of hope and despair entwined in equal measure. Every step echoed through corridors where entire generations had lived, fought, and vanished without record. Above, Distant artillery rumbles were now ghosts of a war long ended, yet their memory clung to the stone like mold. The child paused before a mural depicting a hero whose face had been scorched away by fire, leaving only the outline, an idea made immortal. She touched the empty space where a visage should have been and whispered, "Were you real?" But even legends had no answer to give her. At the heart of the once glorious citadel, its throne room lay open to the sky. Columns snapped like the ribs of a colossal, dying beast. The throne itself, once a symbol of authority and unyielding purpose, now sat fractured, one arm broken, the seat split by a bolt of divine or damnable fire. An old scholar approached it, dragging a pen scratched with runes of old campaigns and forgotten edicts. He had chronicled empires' rise and fall, but never had he seen an age collapse with such finality. He touched the throne's cracked surface, feeling the warmth of a battle long extinguished. In that moment, he realized that power was not eternal, only its consequences were. And he, a simple recorder, had become the last keeper of truths too burdensome for any future age. His final question drifted upward. Who shall remember us when memory itself dies? Above the planet's night side, the stars flickered as though exhausted by the spectacle of mortal devotion and ruin. A fleet of hospital ships glided slowly across the void, gathering survivors, gathering stories, gathering the last remnants of an age that had burned too brightly, too violently. Within a dimly lit ward, a dying warrior murmured to a medic, recounting visions of comrades long gone, of victories that had cost more than defeat, of a god emperor who had never spoken yet had always been listening, or so he believed. The medic held his hand, offering comfort not in doctrine, but in presence. As the warrior's breaths grew thin, he whispered a single thought: was courage ever enough? Then his eyes dimmed, leaving the medic alone with the soft hum of engines and the unbearable fragility of survival. On the edge of the rebuilt settlements, where the soil still smoldered with ancient fire, a group of priests erected a small shrine, humble, unadorned, made from the shattered remains of war machines and weapons no longer fit to kill. Pilgrims gathered, laying offerings of broken icons, scorched feathers, rusted chains. They prayed not for triumph, but for understanding. They sought not prophecy, but peace. A young priestess lifted her gaze to the horizon where the sun bled red over the ruins, casting long shadows that looked like the silhouettes of fallen titans. She spoke softly to the congregation. Endurance is not victory, but it is survival. And survival is hope. Some nodded. Some wept. Some simply breathed in the heavy air, grateful that breath still existed. In that quiet moment, the galaxy felt almost gentle. As twilight settled across the world, the lone remembrancer reached the highest ridge overlooking the scars of the war. He opened his battered chronicle, pages stained with ash blood and tears from countless souls who had entrusted him with their truth. He wrote the last lines slowly, reverently, as though inscribing a eulogy for an entire age. His hand trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of everything left unsaid. When he finished, he closed the book and set it upon a stone altar. The wind lifted its edges, fluttering the pages like winds yearning for flight. In the fading light, he whispered two questions that would haunt the void long after his voice faded. How much must be lost for peace to be real? And who decides the price of survival? Then he turned to us, the last witnesses, and asked that we remember. If this chronicle moved you, stand with it. Like, subscribe, share, and leave your voice in the comments, so that the Imperium remembers you too.